after taking a look at the Master System's best efforts to recreate the first Sonic the Hedgehog game, it seemed like the natural choice to follow up with a playthrough of the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Unlike the first game, I never owned this one, although I was able to borrow a friend's copy and give it a thorough workout. That said, my memories of it are hazy indeed, possibly even hazier than my memories were of the first game. A few elements stick in my mind, but as for the rest, those memories are as lost to the mists of time as my childhood innocence, or my ability to stand up from my chair without groaning like an old wooden house in a high wind as my spine slowly crinkles back into alignment. The Master System version of this game is something of an anomaly. It was never released in the US or Japan, although those regions did at least get the basically identical Game Gear version. And unlike the first Master System Sonic game, this one predates the release of its 16-bit cousin. That technically makes this game the debut of Tails, Sonic's foxy friend. And by foxy I mean he is a fox, not that he's sexy. Although honestly, if I had to pick between Tails and Sonic, I'd definitely go for orange over blue. I've always had a thing for ginger hair. But I digress. To be honest, this is kind of an inauspicious debut for Tails, as he's not playable, and his only real function is to be immediately kidnapped by Robotnik. So he's basically the Princess Peach to Sonic's Mario. Now, if I had to choose between Tails and Peach, that would be... No, I mustn't get distracted. Sonic 2 is also an anomaly in terms of its opening level, Underground Zone. As unlike almost every other Sonic game, it's not a leafy, green, pleasant environment, but rather a mountainous zone with a focus, as the name might suggest, on subterranean areas. It really is oddly disconcerting to play a Sonic game that doesn't ease you in with an island paradise or lush grasslands to traverse. That said, it's really not a bad introduction to the game. It's definitely a step up from the first Master System Sonic in several ways. There's a lot more verticality and complexity in general. There are more pathways through the level, there's the opportunity to do some backtracking, there are more items to find and they're more cunningly hidden. There are minecarts, which are a nifty little addition. There are also a lot more rings scattered around the place, which in a game as fundamentally simple as this, really does a lot to enhance the impression that you're actually achieving something by going out of your way, rather than just holding right on the D-pad until you reach the end of the level. If you do go for the just hold right option, the first two acts are still over super fast, and they can easily take less than a minute each. But this time around there are definitely more reasons to explore. The most important of those reasons is, like the first game, the Chaos Emeralds, which are once again scattered throughout the levels, one per zone. And thanks to the increased complexity of the level design, they're a good bit tougher to find. In fact, I only found one on this playthrough, and that was really just down to luck. They're not exactly super well hidden, but it was a challenge that kept me occupied for a while as a kid. Anyway, in the third act, Robotnik inexplicably saves you from a fiery death, and then it's on to the first boss. And sadly, the bosses in this game aren't really much to write home about. Well, not now that email and text messaging are commonplace, not to mention the Snapchatting, TikToking, and whatever other means of communications you youngsters use. Sure as hell no one's writing letters home these days, especially since no one can afford to move out in the first place, am I right, millennials and zoomers? You whippersnappers spend too much money on smashed avocado, that's my view. Nothing to do with broader economic trends leaving individuals powerless in the face of more expensive education, greater debt, less job security and an increasingly out-of-reach property market, that's for sure. Ooh, was that satire? I'm so proud of myself. Or ashamed. I honestly don't know. So, yes, the boss. It's an antlion in a pit, bombs fall down, you jump over the bombs damage the antlion. Once again, I really think Sonic bosses need to analyse their tactics. Eventually Robotnik shows up again and for some reason flies right into the antlion's flailing pincers. What did I just say? Tactics, Robotnik, tactics! Zone 2, Sky High Zone, is this game's take on the Mega Drive version's Hilltop Zone. Probably. The first act at least has a similar colour scheme and focus on verticality, although it also includes a hang glider. This is an amusing little addition. It's not exactly earth-shattering, but it's kind of fun to see Sonic gliding along and trying to stay aloft for as long as possible. The second act makes better use of it, as a storm is kicked up and there are gusts of wind you can use to glide greater distances. I seem to remember figuring out how to travel even further and faster as a kid, but if there's a trick to it, I couldn't figure it out this time around. Of course, it's perfectly possible I'm misremembering, and this is as fast as you can go. It's not a bad zone, it's possibly the shortest of them all, but the increased verticality coupled with a whole heap of things to bounce off, plus the aforementioned hang glider, make it rather memorable. and the boss is an epic, exciting multi-stage battle of monumental proportions. Well, no, almost none of those words are applicable, but it is technically a multi-stage fight, as once you take out the first wave of adorable robo-chicks, you fall down to the lower cloud layer and get to do it all again, which summons the vengeful mother robo-bird. Is that how robots reproduce, with eggs and hatchlings in specific stages of development? Will the chicks somehow grow in the way that robots typically don't? Tell you what, if Robotnik has somehow managed to combine robotics with an organic-based reproduction cycle, he truly is a scientific genius. Too bad he turned to evil. Anyway, it's not a tough fight, although it is easy to be bounced back into a fireball. Next zone is... oh god, why? It's Aqua Lake Zone. Another watery environment of the sort that have plagued Sonic games pretty much up to the present day. Sonic and water do not mix. Sonic's like a gremlin from that movie, what's it called? Gremlins. Actually, now I think of it, he does kind of look like he could almost be Mogwai's Japanese cousin, the one that went all punk and gelled his hair into spikes then dyed it blue. Actually, to be fair, this water level is a whole heap better than the one from the first Master System Sonic. The whole game doesn't slow down as drastically underwater, and in the first act at least you can even skim along the water's surface. Plus there are loops. They don't serve much of a purpose, but hey, it's just nice to see them after their absence in the first game. The second act takes place entirely underwater, and yet it somehow manages to not be a complete nightmare. There are tunnels to zip through at high speed, and the bits where you have to use a bubble to ascend slowly are kind of frustrating, but also one of the game's more substantial challenges, which isn't saying much, of course. And the boss is possibly its least substantial challenge. Once you figure out that you can jump on its nose while it's still inflating, there's literally nothing it can do to harm you. Zone 4 is, hey, it's Green Hill Zone! Finally, I honestly have no idea why they didn't make this the first zone. The only thing I can think is that they wanted to deliberately break with tradition. Whatever the case may be, I think it was a mistake, because I'd say this is the best looking zone in the game, with the way it captures that iconic Sonic style. It's certainly the best sounding zone in the game. On the whole, I think the music in Sonic's second Master System outing is significantly better than the first, which feels weird to say, as the great Yuzo Koshiro was responsible for that one. And this track, with its catchy upbeat melody, is, I think, the only one that can truly compare with the 16-bit versions. And I guess I'm not the only one who liked it, as this tune was later used as the basis for the opening theme of Sonic CD. In terms of layout and design, however, it is one of the simpler zones. I even managed to luck into the Chaos Emerald here, the only one I found in this playthrough. This simplicity really does make me think it should have been the first zone. But as they say, a change is as good as a holiday. I don't know why they say that, it's patently false, but whatever. The boss is kind of tricky. It's a sumo pig that charge rolls towards you, which is easy enough to avoid, but sometimes it seems to give you only a tiny window to attack, making it a risky proposition to hurl your fragile blue body towards it. It's the lead up to the boss that is actually tougher here. You need to spring over a series of spike pits, and as there are never any rings in these boss stages, one misstep means the loss of a life. And unless you're super careful and pretty damn lucky, until you've properly memorized the layout, you're guaranteed a death or two, and maybe more. In fact, some of the death traps in these boss stages seem genuinely unfair, as if they were only put there to make sure young gamers everywhere don't zoom through the entire game too easily. Which honestly is fair enough, given just how quickly this game can be over. Anyway, Zone 5, Gimmick Mountain. It's your standard high-tech Sonic zone with conveyor belts, moving platforms, rotating discs and flashing lights in the background. Which is all fine, but actually it's maybe a little too standard. I had absolutely zero memory of this zone before I came upon it again in this playthrough, and honestly I had very little memory of it after this playthrough. I had to re-watch the video footage to remember much about it. Well, apart from the boss stage. Once again, it's the lead up to the boss that is far more challenging and memorable, although not really in a good way in this case. You've got to ride a moving platform over a bunch of spikes, and you will definitely die a couple of times before you memorize its route. Plus it's possible to accidentally despawn it if you get too far ahead of it, leaving you trapped with no way out other than hurling yourself to an agonizing death on the spikes below. Which is possibly a good metaphor for existence. If your existence is anything like mine at least. Once you get to the boss, it's another super easy encounter. Jump over the boss when it charges, attack when its spikes are down. The falling rocks may be a minor issue, but they're pretty easy to avoid. Onto Scrambled Egg Zone, the 6th and final zone. Well, potentially final. This is a place I most definitely do have memories of. The incredible speed of Sonic zooming through the tunnels, especially with the rapid changes of direction, was massively impressive to me at the time. I was told, and this may well be complete rubbish, that it was this zone in particular that was responsible for the requirement for epilepsy warnings in video games. Whether that's true or not, I took great pride in my humble Master System's supposed ability to induce seizures. Playing through it now with the eyes of an adult, eyes that are, fortunately, still not susceptible to supposedly seizure-inducing graphics, I'm not sure this zone holds up to scrutiny. Sure, it's still impressive by Master System standards, and there is just something cool about the complexity and overall zaniness of the pipes, but once you've got over that, there's really not much to this level. It's mostly just a trial and error process of figuring out which turns in which pipes take you where, which isn't super compelling gameplay. Ultimately, where they take you to is the final, kind of, boss, Silver Sonic. Or Metal Sonic? Robo Sonic? I honestly can't remember what he was called in this version. Just a sec. Okay, in an uncharacteristic burst of diligence, I went and tracked down a PDF of the original game manual, and it does indeed refer to him as Silver Sonic, as I thought. Vindication. Anyway, he's very slightly more complicated than the other bosses, he has a few different moves, but none of them are too threatening, and it's just a matter of waiting to jump on him when he's vulnerable. And, well, I guess that's it. There is actually a bonus level that you can only access if you have acquired all the Chaos Emeralds, which I didn't manage. So this is the end of the game. Robotnik presumably escapes, Tails remains captured. Sonic runs along all by himself as the credits roll, then looks up into the night sky, where the image of Tails glows amongst the stars. Now, I definitely can't just leave it there, can I? Well, of course I can. I'm the laziest person on the planet. I assume. I haven't bothered to verify that fact. But this time, I can't just let Tails languish in Robotnik's custody, so let's go through the whole thing again and get all the emeralds. I've always appreciated games that reward you with extra content for being thorough, especially in the 8-bit era, when you're lucky if a game had any replay value whatsoever. So that's 1 Chaos Emerald, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get the 6th for killing Silver Sonic. Now, instead of the game just ending with Sonic all alone, bereft of his foxy friend, you get to go to Crystal Egg Zone. And it's another level that's basically fine but not truly remarkable. Except, of course, it's a hidden bonus stage. So back in the day, that made it the most exciting thing I'd seen since that day at the swimming pool when that girl I fancied... you know what? Never mind about that. Anyway, it's an okay level. The crystal theme certainly sets it apart, as does the music. I can't figure out if it's annoyingly interesting or interestingly annoying, but it's certainly something. And finally, it's time to face Robotnik himself. Although what you do for the vast majority of the fight is fly around the outside of the arena, safe in your glass pipe, waiting for a safe moment to zoom out and bop Robotnik on his bald skull. Or actually anywhere in the vicinity the big lightning generator is sitting in. It's not the most dynamic boss fight to end the game with, but really none of the boss fights have been even remotely dynamic. Even once you've defeated him, and even in this, the technically good ending, Robotnik gets away. But he does at least send Tails back to Sonic's waiting arms, and the two fall into a steamy embrace. Well, in my fanfiction they do. In the actual game, they just run along for a while. I know, my ending's better, right? At least in this ending, the two furry pals both get their faces pasted onto the night sky. And that's Sonic 2 on the Master System. Overall, it's a definite improvement over the first game, mostly due to the fact the levels are a lot more expansive and interesting to traverse. They're still tiny by modern standards, and not exactly vast by the standards of the day, but there are plenty of hidden corners to explore. The gameplay seems to be a touch sharper than the first game, although that may just be due to the significant decrease of slowdown. It's kind of a shame they didn't include the spin dash that debuted in the Mega Drive version, but that's a minor quibble. Ultimately, this was a good game for its day. It's one of the Master System's better platformers, although it does make me appreciate Wonder Boy 3 all over again for just how much more content and interest it managed to pack into an 8-bit platformer. But judging Sonic 2 on its own merits, it was worth playing back then, and I had fun playing through it once again. but I suspect it's only going to be of primarily historical interest for most modern gamers. Well, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that I've set up a Twitter account for the channel. Do please consider giving me a follow, links in the description. The creator of Echo the Dolphin follows me, so if he can do it, surely you can too. Of course, he follows literally everyone who follows him, so I guess it doesn't count as a glowing endorsement. Also, if you're insanely wealthy and you think I've earned it somehow, maybe consider buying me a coffee on Ko-fi.com. That link's in the description too. Anyway, you know what comes next. Get off my lawn.